go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
My name is Joe Slattery. I'm one of the staff members in the genealogy department here at Baltimore Branch. And today we'll be talking about the most endangered places in Shreveport. Start off, I was going to call it endangered in Caddo Parish because that's how I was found these on the internet. But it turns out that all these that are in Caddo Parish are in Shreveport, so it really is mostly just in Shreveport. And this information, this list, comes from the Louisiana Trust for Historic Preservation. Since 1999, they've been putting out a yearly list of the most endangered places in the state. And for 2022, there's 23 of them in Caddo Parish. And they tell you what the status is on here, whether it starts off as endangered or if they're in progress of being saved. If the structures have been saved and then some of them are lost. In fact, in Shreveport, these ones that are 5 of them on your list have been saved. I'll tell you which ones they are when we get to them. And 4 of them are lost.
Any handouts?
Yeah, from
Oh, sure.
just give her a pen. And mainly this one, right?
So let's go to the first one. And they're on the list, the first 2, the Woolworth Building and the Friendship House, are the 2 that are new, that have just been put on the list in 2022. So the Woolworth Building was built in 1908. It's considered, since it's brand new on the list, it's endangered. It was owned by, turns out, my great-grandfather, John Vernon Slattery. The family kept it until 1997. And there's 2 stories about the building that I can tell you. In 1908, my grandfather, Joseph Slattery, he was kind of like a supervisor there when they were building it. The architect was a guy named Harry Bridges. And my grandfather was there kind of supervising, and one day up above they had on scaffolding, there was a wheelbarrow with some bricks on it. And turns out he was right underneath that wheelbarrow. And wheelbarrow tumped over, the bricks were coming down, and somebody yelled to my grandfather and got out of the way, or otherwise I wouldn't be here. The other story is about the building is interesting. When they started working on it and they had the scaffolding, then the city of Shreveport passed a new law that said that if you had scaffolding on the sidewalk, you had to make a walkthrough. And they did this after my great-grandfather had started the building. So they came to him and said, you have to do a walkthrough because the women and all the ones, they don't want to go into the street and get their shoes muddy, and you've got to do the walkthrough. And he said, no, I'm not. And he was an attorney. He said, I'm not going to do that. That's for people who are just starting their buildings. I've already been working on this. And he said he would do it, so they arrested him. A guy named Edgar Allen. He was chief of police. He was also the commissioner of streets, so he had 2 titles. And so he arrested him for a little while and got out, and then he said, well, are you going to do the walkthrough? And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. He got arrested again. Turned out he was arrested 3 times. It's in the paper each time. And finally, Edgar Allen got upset, and one night he decided to go down and he pulled down all the scaffolding. And then he was arrested. although he was chief of police. But he was arrested, and when he went to court, the judge, he asked him, he said, were you, when you were pulling down the scaffolding, were you acting as chief of police or commissioner of streets? And it turned out that made a difference. And he said the right thing, and the judge let him off.
Did your grandfather also build the side of the building?
Yes, my great-grandfather, he was alive until 1927, and the Slattery building was finished about 1924. So he was, and this one was called, when it was first built, it was called the Slattery. This is a photo from 1954, and this, I got this from the Magnum Brothers twin blends. Although, this is when they were changing, they were doing some remodeling on the Woolworth building. It had already been, Woolworth moved in and signed a lease in 1912. Between 1908 and 1912, the U.S. Post Office was inside the building. They had leased it because they were working on the new federal building. That's where the main branch library is now. So they were working on that building, and so the post office was inside the, what was then called the Slattery building until 1912 when Woolworth signed the lease.
And when did it stop being Woolworths? When did it stop being Woolworths?
It stopped being a Woolworth in 1992. So for 80 years, I think they signed 2 separate 40-year leases. And so this is in March 1954 when they were remodeling.
19, what did you say?
1954.
No, I mean, when did it close?
Oh, it closed in they stopped business in 1992. So in October, which you can see that was from March to October, they worked on it, and this is what it looked like after it was remodeled, renovated, and by October 1954. After they did this renovating, they put in an escalator. It's first escalator in Shreveport, although some people say it was Sears one, or another one was a little before, but most of them say that Woolworths had the first escalator in Shreveport. It had, of course, 2 floors of merchandise. I was surprised when I saw that they had 250 employees. Seems like a lot for it. So it covered 2 floors. They had a bakery and a kitchen. Now this is a photo from 1902. This is in the same location as where the Woolworth building. My great-grandfather he bought this building before, and he's in the photo exactly. This is my great-grandfather right here, John Bernard Slattery. And he had his office there. He was an attorney along with his son, John Francis Slattery. And there's a sign right here that says, "Own your own land." They were also selling real estate. So they're attorneys and realtors. And my great uncle, John Francis Slattery, he was an attorney too, he is right here. And the reason I know it's 1902 is that that's the only year from the city directories that American Telegraph College was in the building.
Where are they pointing at? Where are the arrows, do you know?
Oh, my grandfather put those, he pointed down to his father and his
Oh, I see.
brother. And some of the family thought that this was my Uncle Frank, but my grandfather put down here John, so no, it was John. The next one, which is new on the list for 2022, is the Friendship House.
Joe, one question. Have you had a chance to go into the World War building just within the past couple of years?
No, I haven't.
I had an opportunity to tour it about a year and a half ago. It's interesting to see what still survives out of it.
I do have a letter that the architect, Harry Bridges, wrote to my grandfather years later, talking about when he was working on the World War building. And it's an interesting letter. The Friendship House was built in 1905, and it's still considered, it's just on the list this year, so it's endangered. The first owner was someone named Jim Rose. He lived there for a number of years. And the reason it's called the Friendship House is in 1954, the Catholic diocese here, they decided to create, there were friendship houses all around the country. There was a movement for these friendship houses that started in 1928. And what they were Catholic interracial centers that would help with financial assistance programs for the people in the community. And the center was open to all races. So it was 1954 when it became the Friendship House. This is about the year that it did, went in 1954. I don't know why it only stayed a Friendship House for 1.5 years, from 1954 to 1955. I did find that it was mentioned in a dissertation. A woman who was attending Texas Tech University, she wrote her dissertation on the history of friendship, of the Friendship House movement. And she included this one here in Shreveport. The next one, now this isn't a new one, this one was put on the list in 2015. It's at 690 Jordan at the corner with Louisiana. It was built in 1903. It was owned by a guy named Bob Hughes, and he had a family store in there. At least by the next year, in 1904, there was a family store, and then they called it a market. This is a little later. This is in 1917. There's an advertisement, and they call it the Woods Odell Grocery. You see, they're selling a lot of fish and seafood, even some ducks and a variety of things. So, so that guy who first owned it is, I guess he sold out to either Woods or Odell. Okay, the next one is the Andrus Motor Company. At 717 Crockett. It was built in 1929, and it's considered safe now. It was put on the list in 2011. In 1929, though it was not the Andrus Motor Company, it was called Howard Motor Company for a little while. The building was designed by Sam Weiner. In the spot of that building, where that building was built, previously you had the Shreveport Sanitarium, the North Louisiana Sanitarium, the North Louisiana Sanitarium Training School for Nurses. So it was an entirely different building that was there until 29 that had to do with medical facilities. You can see this is what it looked like before remodel. And also, before this a few years before this building was built, there was a hotel there. It was called the Arcade Hotel. That was in between the time it was medical facilities and this building here. It was an arcade for just a little while. Arcade Hotel.
Arcade.
And this is, you can see it's already improved. This was during remodeling. See, it's, and there's an article in the newspaper from February 14th, 2021, just a couple of years ago, where they finished the remodeling, and now it's called the Andrus Artist and Entrepreneur Center.
Don't they have weddings and things there? There's a bar in there that you can rent for events? Am I wrong about that?
I'm not sure if it's an event center too.
Has a basement, does it have a basement?
Upstairs.
That's where,
It's,
Jessica's wedding.
It's open pretty much, but the artist party.
yeah, artists,
Doesn't work out. You
And
drive
they-
up right to it from down in.
and they have offices.
Melissa's
And they're
daughter.
open on, second Saturdays, I believe, with all the artists, with all the food trucks coming in.
Antioch Baptist Church was built in 1903. It's still considered endangered. It's been on the list since 2019. It was designed by the well-known architect N.S. Allen, Nathaniel Sykes Allen. He was the architect for a number of houses and buildings, but here in the Shreveport area, there's only a few that survive. There's Antioch Baptist Church, the Line Avenue School, the Logan Mansion, the Oddfellows Hall on Texas Avenue, and two of them I'm familiar with, my great-grandfather Slattery's house, that's on the corner of Dalzell and Fairfield, and my great-uncle John Francis Slattery, who lived right next door. They found out not too long ago that his house was also designed by N.S. Allen. So the Antioch Baptist Church, it started off in 1866 in another location, but it was first called the First Colored Baptist Church. And then in 1871, they changed the name to Antioch Baptist Church.
And when was it built?
1903. And here's a photo from around 1980. They did do some restoration in 2000, so about 23 years ago, but it needs it again. There's a dwindling congregation, and they have trouble with water. Water is infiltrating into it.
Roof is leaking, yes.
Okay, the Artist Johnson Building was built in 1921. It's still considered endangered. It was put on the list in 2011. And it was first called just the Artist Building. It was built on there used to be a residence there of the Artist family. Colonel Clinton H. Artist was born 1828 and died 1906. After he died, his daughter, Penny Artist Mills, lived there. So it was a residence up until 1921. This building is 8 floors, and the architect he was a well-known architect too, Edward Neal. It was renamed the Johnson Building in 1951. It was named after W. Harry Johnson, because he bought the building in 1949. The next one you might be familiar with, the Arlington Hotel, was built in 1911. and it's considered saved. It was put on the list in 2011. This was in the, I can't remember if it was in the 318 form or newspaper, but those were proposed plans in late 2019, how they were going to change, and they were going to make, their plans were to have a distillery. It was called Every Man a King Distillery, a French-style restaurant called Revenir, and a speakeasy bar. That previously the Arlington Hotel had been vacant since 1970.
So did they do any of that?
So this is ongoing renovation at the Arlington Hotel. They had a slowdown. It turns out that over these years, the vagrants had gotten in there. There'd been multiple fires that had gutted much of the interior. So you can see what they had to do, just leaving the walls. Also the roof collapsed. They've also had trouble with lack of labor and also labor costs going up. And just a few months ago, in December of 2022, the Downtown Development Authority, they had an update and said since they're having all these problems, they're still going ahead and they're going to cut back or postpone postpone the distillery, but they are still going to try to do the restaurant and speakeasy on the first floor and have an event space on the second floor. B'nai Zion was built in 1915. It's considered in progress of being saved. It was put on the list in 2011. And the architect was Edward Neal, along with another named Clarence Olshner. If you notice, this building looks kind of like one just in the same area, the Scottish Rite Temple. That's because the same architects designed that one too.
Second quarter of the same intersection.
Yeah, that one. This is a photo from around 1980, and you notice here it says Knights of Columbus, which is a Catholic organization. The Knights of Columbus, they occupied the building from 1956 to 1988. Presently, since Knights of Columbus doesn't have anything to do with the building now, they have put B'nai Zion Temple back on. And just in 2021, the building was bought by Eric Hess, who's the head of Sanctuary Art School and Glass Studio, and he's renovating. So it's that's why it's in progress. But if after a while, when the Louisiana Trust feels that it's been enough done, just call it saved, and move it to that status. Bridges McKellar House, 1324 Oakland, was built in 1906. There is some wrong information out there. They say it's built in 1885. That's 20 years earlier. I and my colleague Reed over there, we've done some good research and using things, and there's no way it was built in 1885.
Saber maps show pretty clear.
It is considered endangered. It's been on the list since 2007. And it was built by Reuben Neal McKellar, who was mayor of Shreveport from 1896 to 1899. He was street commissioner 1908 to 1910, and also from 1922 to 1930. He was born in Texas, 1855. And another reason I know that it was built around 1906 is Reuben Keller himself. He put an article in the paper in 1916 saying he'd been at that location for 10 years. Reuben's wife was Theodosia Hamilton. And Reuben, besides being mayor and all, he was a cotton factor, was on the city council. He was one of the directors of the Commercial National Bank. Supposedly this was the first home in the city that had what was called forced air, central air conditioning. It also has a large stone cistern there. That was supposedly the first cistern in the city, and now it's the last cistern in the city.
The twin brands of Reuben throughout the whole house of the pictures of each room. So it's on twin brand site.
Okay.
Who owns it?
I'm not sure about that.
Well, I've been in it and I shouldn't have been, but local legally should.
We won't tell.
The stonework is different, isn't it? You said it was.
Oh yeah, it's used patent stone. I don't know during
Pressed concrete blocks, called,
So-
all patents.
so were they weren't doing that back in 1880s.
No,
You can tell just by the style, it's not 1887. It's much plainer than the Victorian. More,
it's one of the very few surviving patents from the houses in town. There, at one time, there were probably 15 or 20 of them. There were about maybe 3 or 4 still standing.
But
Eric Reed on it.
yeah, I hope somebody comes to the rescue on that house pretty soon, because like I say, it's been on the list for 16 years. And
It would cost a fortune. I think it's someone I've worked with was kind of taking care of it. And because it's behind the police station, it kind of has not been vandalized as bad as it could have been.
The next one, the Caddo Street House. Now I have 626 Caddo on there. The reason that's not probably correct because now this house that I'm showing here was built in the 1870s, and it's lost. And wherever the one that was on the Louisiana Trust list is, they don't put the address, so I don't know where on Caddo Street, but all the wherever it was on Caddo Street, it's lost. I just picked out this one because this was one of the oldest ones on Caddo Street at 626. The Caddo Street house was put on the list 2011, and I'm not sure when it was considered lost. But I know that looking through an inventory from 1984 of all the houses in the Bottoms area, this one here was the oldest house on Caddo Street. The Clanthian Temple was built in 1923. It's considered, the status is in progress. It was put on the list in 2001. It was built by the Court of Calantha, which was an African-American women's organization. And it was used as a home to African-American dentists, doctors, attorneys, and other professionals. It had offices in there. But it was more than just an office building. Now there's a historical marker. They also had Mardi Gras balls there. They had dances and concerts. A lot of these were held on the roof. I was surprised. Here's some of the musicians that performed there, probably on the roof. Louis Armstrong, Dizzy Gillespie, Count Basie, Jelly Roll Morton, Duke Ellington. The rooftop was in bad shape, and it has been re-roofed. So the building's now leak-free. And also besides having the music and dances on the roof, the basement was supposedly a speakeasy.
It was recently, had a talk on this with Dr. Cheryl White at this big temple, and her students showed the artifacts they had found in the building. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's, so luckily it's in, like I say, it's in progress, and it's good they got the roof fixed, so keep the water out of there.
You know, it's like the one standing building on that block. It used to be a thriving center, the whole Texas Avenue. And it's the one that got left. This is not quite destroyed yet.
Cora Allen was very much involved with this. She was the one that had were involved.
And I think she was, that building was the tallest building owned by an African-American woman, at least, you know, in the area, probably, but in many states around here.
Is that west of downtown?
It's, yeah, it's out on Texas Avenue, so it's,
West of downtown.
yeah, west of County.
Yes, ma'am.
The four frescoes at the Louisiana State Exhibit Museum, which they're at the fairgrounds on Greenwood Road. The four frescoes were put in about the same time as the building, which was, I think the building they started in maybe 1830, 37, not 19. I mean, sorry, I said 18. Yeah, 1937. And the four frescoes are on the outside of the building. Four frescoes were put up there in 1938, and this is considered saved. It almost wasn't, but they put the four frescoes on the list in 2000. These frescoes flank the entrance, but over the years, they've been washed out by the wind and the rain. They have some protection, but each of these frescoes is 16 feet tall. The muralist was a guy named Conrad Albrizio. This was during the WPA, and he painted in the WPA style. And this Albrizio did a lot of projects from 1925 till the 1960s. But in 1992, they were doing some renovation to the museum, but they weren't going to do anything to the murals. And somebody said, you have 10 years to do work on those murals, but by 2002, they'll be unsalvageable.
It'd be what?
They'll be unsalvageable. So here's the four, they did get to these, and here's the four different murals. There's two of them. Okay, the woman is on the east side. She represents South Louisiana. The man is on the west side of the entrance, representing North Louisiana. Next to the one over here on the left is on the west side of the entrance, is representing North Louisiana, goes along with the man, and it shows the industrial way of life. Over on the right-hand side, which is on the east side, along with the woman, represents South Louisiana, the agricultural way of life.
You want to see more stuff by the artist, you know Alan Hall at LSU? who did murals in Allen Hall LSU. They were painted over, and they removed the paint and restored them. So you just, it's an academic building in LSU. Janitor loaned me a ladder, I got to climb up, take photographs, it was great. It's worth the trip to Baton Rouge to see that.
Yeah, Eric Brock had an article just about these murals, and in it he mentioned a lot of the other things that Conrad Abrizio that he worked on. It was quite a list. Okay, Hamilton Terrace School was built in 1925. It's considered in progress. It was put on the list in 2014. But it's not always been called Hamilton Terrace. It started off, it was just called Louisiana Avenue School. All the way until 1944, when they called it Hamilton Terrace after the subdivision that was across the street. It was named Hamilton because after William Everard Hamilton, who was born 1865 and died in 1959. He was an owner of the Shreveport Times. He was also a banker, ran the city trolley system, and also was involved with the Shreveport Light and Power Company. I was trying to find another photo of Hamilton Terrace, but I did come across this one, which is across the street from Hamilton Terrace, but this is from a postcard in 1910. And so it's across Louisiana Avenue, and I think about this house right here, the third house, the school would be almost directly across from that one there.
And that's all now the location of the Willis Knight Rehab Hospital.
And it was called, I mentioned at one time, Hamilton Terrace neighborhood. W.K. Henderson Ironworks. Okay, this ironworks was built in 1900. Part of it was, so, but they were added on, but I'm saying 1900. I saw it on a 1900 Sanborn map. The Louisiana Trust puts down 1920. So
Depends on which of the buildings you're talking about, because
Yeah.
we had several buildings.
yeah. And 1920, the one who really this is named after, William Kennon Henderson, he had died by 1918. He's the one who started it. So yeah, it ended up, it was one of the largest ironworks in the whole South. Also, William Kennon Henderson Sr., like I said, he was born 1851, died in 1918. He started the first automobile garage in the city. He had been living over in Jefferson, Texas, and he came to Shreveport about 1898 and then started building this ironworks in around 1900. The ironworks was put on the list in 2011. It's lost. All its, they put it on the lost list.
Where is it? Where's the cross streets there?
Okay, it's let me go. It started off. It was located right on the corner there, Cabot and Spring. Now there was just one building. The first building was would be on the northeast corner of Cabot and Spring. But it grew. Now W.K. Henderson Jr., the son, was born in 1880, and he took over from his father, and so he helped with the ironworks, and he built up the automobile garage. They're saying to the largest automobile garage in the whole United States. But then he sold the ironworks, and he got interested around 1920s in radio. And he was known as the radio man. KWKH is the station that he started in 1923, and he kept it until 1933. And seeing it, don't know about him, he's quite a character. And when he came out, one of his sayings was, "Hello world, doggone you."
So it's torn down, you mean?
Yeah, this part, Joe, can you go back to the, well, let me speak to this one. This portion, which was on the north side of Academy, is all gone. But if you can go back to the other photo, this two-story portion over here was built where that one-story was. But this building was also part of W.K. Henderson Ironworks, and this one still survives. This was the location of their oil field supply works. And it's still there, but it's boarded up. So part of the W.K. Henderson complex is gone, but this newest part of it from the 1920s, or late teens, early 20s, I think, is still standing.
So Louisiana Trust is not correct saying it's all lost.
One part of it is still.
Here is this is an advertisement from 1926. And it covered 2 blocks. So it covered from Fannin to Caddo and from Spring to Commerce. And you can see it says the South's largest. McNeil Street Pumping Station. And you notice the address 142 North Common. So got McNeil Street and North Common. Got two address. Well, it's actually between McNeil and North Common. But it was built in 1887, and it's considered saved.
It's a museum now, isn't it? It's a museum now?
Yeah, museum.
Very old residential.
It was put on the list in 1999. In fact, it was on the very first Louisiana Trust Endangered list in 1999. So it's saved, and it's good. It's also considered a National Historic Landmark. Became one in 1982, which that's the only one in Shreveport, the only historic landmark, which is the highest historic site designation. It's more than just being on the National Register of Historic Places. But back in the early days of the pumping station, it was an improvement, but because the city had terrible waste and sewer problems. And a lot of people before this, they had to haul water from springs and wells, and they also had cisterns that were above ground or underground. Another shot of it. The station, this pumping station at first they used Cross Bayou and Red River as the water source. But then in 1926, after Cross Lake was on, that's what became Shreveport's primary water supply. But they also, in 1926, when they got Cross Lake set up, they put a new waterworks out on Cross Lake somewhere. So the pumping station was retired in 1980. It is a unique water pumping station, and there's only one other one like it that is in working order, and that's in the Smithsonian. The Mutual building was built in 1923, and it's endangered. It was put on the list 2011. I've mentioned 2011 a lot because they put a lot of them from the Shreveport area on the list in 2011. It was built it's at the corner it's on Crockett, and then this is McNeil, this is McNeil right here. At the corner of Crockett and McNeil. It was built by the Shreveport Mutual Building Association. That's an association that began here in 1887. So it was called, it was just called the Shreveport Mutual Building. And I think on the, you can see, I believe it's hard to read, but I believe that's what was written up there on those words. But in 1934, the name changed to First Federal Savings. And it stayed First Federal Savings for a while until 1961. It became the home for Shreveport Chamber of Commerce. Here's another shot of it from the side, and you can see the extent, although I believe, and maybe Richard knows, it looks like this might have been added later. This might have been the original, and then they added this part back there later.
So are most of these buildings privately owned?
Yeah, I believe so.
So Shreveport doesn't own them?
Now, coming to one later that the Downtown Development Corporation does own, just recently. I'll get to that. So, in fact, I saw the document, and Liz Swain was one who signed on that. Okay, the Ogilvy Grocery Building was built in 1869, around there. That's what Eric Brock has that year. It's lost, and it's lost just recently. Just in the past year, I think it was lost from a fire. It was put on the list in 2011. And if you've been down in Shreve Square where this is where the Humphreys Club, Humphreys in the Square was located. Along, later on, some clubs called Malibu or Sports Page. They were in this same location there. The back wall collapsed in 2008. And so it wasn't on the list until 2011, but they were able to fix the back wall, so it kept going for a while, but then there was the fire just this past year. It was called Ogilvy after William Burwell Ogilvy, born 1847, died 1899. He had a grocery in there, and then when he died, his family continued for a while. There's another photo of it. William B. Ogilvy, his son, named Russell Jennings Ogilvy, he's the one that had Ogilvy Hardware Store. And that's, of course, another location. It's not on the endangered list. The Ogilvy Hardware Store was built in 1926.
Well, is Ogilvy Hardware the apartments now?
Well, there's also Lee Hardware.
Yes, it's an Ogilvy building.
It could,
Yes.
I think it is.
Yeah,
Just that
we
one.
toured both of those, yeah.
The Ogilvy Wiener House was built 1898, and it's in progress of being saved. It was put on the list in 2009.
It was built when?
It was put on the list of 2009.
When was
Oh,
it
built
built?
1898. It's on Austin Place, although Austin Place used to be known as Christian. They changed it to, I'm not sure what year, changed it to Austin Place.
Was this moved to this allocation, or is this where it was built?
That's where it was built. There was a house there in that area, Christian, that I think was moved, but not this one. Later on, this was the home of that William Burwell Ogilvy. That was his home.
Is
Late,
that the Florentine?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
oh,
the,
I've been in that house recently. Yeah, the lady does tours.
Yes.
and later it was, owned by, Samuel G. Weiner Senior. They remodeled it heavily in the 1950s, and it was a private supper club, the Florentine.
That little low part to the left, that was added on later.
Over there on the right.
With no roof, yeah, that does, it looks like it doesn't belong here. Or was that a part of the original house?
I'm not sure.
That one story to the right? With the long narrow window?
Yeah, doesn't look good.
I'm sure that was part of the remodeling.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And all of
I'm
this,
sure that porch is not glassed in.
all of this is part of the remodeling. It's what enclosed in the porch.
At one time was an open porch, I'm sure.
Old Galilee Baptist Church on Williamson Street. It was built in 1926, and it's in progress. It's been on the list since 2011.
Is that the place where Martin Luther King spoke?
Yes, it is.
It's across from the police station?
The old Galilee Baptist Church was, up until 1926, or around, it was on Hope Street, 1024 Hope. This location here on Williamson, it was vacant for 47 years before they started, in 2018, some of the people who wanted to restore it, they were able to get a grant for $500,000 in 2018 to start repairing it. And also they were working on helping this building become a civil rights museum. So with that $500,000, they put a new roof and new floors in. There's a marker. And you can see there it mentions in 1958 and 1962, Dr. Martin Luther King spoke there. It was put on the National Register of Historic Places in 1984.
So is it considered in progress or?
Yes, in progress.
I shot it last month, they've got new windows in place. You can see in the photograph, they're not original windows, they look too nice.
So it was founded in 1877, and it was in this location from 1926 to 1975. There's a painting by Stan Ruth. And so now what's next for them to do is, like you just mentioned, they want to put in period appropriate windows. And they still have money. They have got some more money for this restoration. They have $1.5 million left to do, but they said they could need $3 million more.
Looks like if you go back, it looks like, did they run the street right up to the front door? Go back to the original picture?
The original.
Well, I guess two more.
And you said it
Yeah,
was,
looks like-
The street does go
Pretty close.
That
That might be the side.
That's not the front.
Yeah, that could be the side. Yeah. Is it there?
and it's still planning to be a civil rights museum?
Yeah, it is. At the Barnwell, the Barnwell Garden and Arts Center, it was built in 1970, and it is considered saved. It was put on the list in 2014. It's on Clyde Fant Parkway, and this is just a drawing. This is before it was built, what they thought it would look like.
What's the address on Clyde Fant?
sure if I have that.
500 or 600, I think. Because
So-
he was in the doors.
It was named after Robert Sim, and his nickname is Cap Barnwell. He was an oil man. He was a patron of the arts.
That isn't where the aquarium is, I never go down there.
Yes.
Yes.
It is?
So there's the Dome Botanical Conservatory that was in there. They, now, Robert Sim Barnwell he was born over in Texas, 1894, and he died in 1967. So after he died, the family decided, they started planning and what they could do with, and create something that, in memory of him. And they had $500,000. And it ended up, after they finished all the construction, it went up a little bit to $582,000. They had hundreds of plants. The Barnwell had meeting rooms, art workshops, a gallery space, and even a garden and art library. So the Shreveport Aquarium, like you mentioned, is in that location now.
So is the Barnwell still there, or is it now the Shreveport Aquarium?
The aquarium occupies the building. The building's still there, but the Barnwell Center is no longer in operation.
Okay.
And the aquarium opened in 2017.
So don't feel too guilty about not knowing what the heck that was.
The Lanford and Rubenstein buildings on Lyle Street across from the courthouse. We've got two buildings here. One on this one is one that's called the Lanford Building, but actually it's only been the Lanford Building since about in 1970s. It was really built by a photographer named Joseph Danley. He was a well-known photographer, and so that was, let's say this was 1907, this building here. The one that's called the Rubenstein Building, this one here, was built about 1914. And these are considered in progress. They were put on the list in 2011. Actually, some of the Danleys kept interest in this building on the left until 1973, when they sold to T.B. Lanford. And when I looked up to see what was T.B. stood for, and I found something on there, and I think it was, I don't know if it was what document it was, but it had T.B. Lanford and said only initials he has on. So he was one of those that only had initials. Now, this is shot here, shows this building is not endangered. This is the Giddings building. That was built in 1917. And then, of course, this is the Lanford, and this is the Rubenstein. The Rubenstein building was actually, when it was built, it was known as the Kittrell building. And even before it was built, that was a boarding house that my great-great-grandparents ran, called the McCoy House, back around 1900. Rubensteins moved into to this building in 1926. Rubensteins had been on Texas Street before that. And it stayed, Rubenstein stayed in there until 1986. So from 1926 to 1986, Rubenstein. And eventually what happened, Rubenstein started here, but it expanded and included the ground floor on both of these buildings. And there's, this is an advertisement for, on the Danley building, or Lanford, in 1917, so they were selling cars. I don't know if it was actually a car showroom, if they had got cars in there, or they just selling them in that location.
$1,625 for that car. Because that's what my glasses are showing me, is that right? $1,625.
There's a few more left. This is the Sanger Building. It's at the corner of Louisiana and Byron. And it was built in 1900. This is another one that's kind of strange. It says Sanger 1900 up here. Louisiana Trust has it at 1920. I don't know why, but it was,
Bunch of trust fund bozos.
so it was built 1900. It is on the endangered. It was put on the list in 2011. And it was built by two brothers, Julian and Abe Sanger. They were sons of Israel Sanger, who was a rabbi at B'nai Zion. And so they had down on the ground floor, they had a pharmacy, a drugstore, and the upper floors were a hotel. It was called the Hall Hotel, run by Mrs. W.H. Hall. And here's in the drugstore, this is from a postcard, and they had a soda fountain there. That also upstairs were the offices for the Sanger Company. The Sanger Company owned over 300 theaters, including the Strand. They ended up selling out to, I don't know what year it was, they sold out to Paramount for $10 million.
And what year was that?
I'm not sure when they sold out.
Is that old bar still in there? What does it look like inside now?
Oh, it's a shoe store.
It was a shoe
It was a shoe store, yeah, shoe store was the last thing in there.
So that's gone, almost gone.
Yeah. Oh, back on I forgot to mention that on those Rubenstein, the Lanford and Rubenstein buildings, they were owned by Roland Toops from Thrifty Liquor, but in 2020, he donated it to the Downtown Shreveport Development Corporation.
So that's the one that's owned by the city.
Yeah.
You're talking about.
Sprague Street House. This was built around 1890. It's lost. In fact, it's been gone since 2019. I don't know how long they keep it on the list until they take it off.
I say lost, I mean, is it,
It's gone. It's gone. Yeah.
Diamond Rose is gone?
They put it on the list in 2015. It was one of 6 shotgun houses. One of 6 shotgun houses that, and this was the last one. And I remember Eric Brock saying, "We've got to save that last one." I think that this one was the last one, even going back to 2007. But they weren't able to save it.
You mean the last shotgun house in Shreveport?
No, the last one, that was one of those 6.
Oh,
6. I'm going to show, and I have a shot of those 6 shotgun houses before. This is in the 1100 block of Sprague, near the corner with Christian Street. Here's a historical marker. They did put, we call it Sprague Street Road, and it had 6 of these shotgun houses or cottages. They were on the National Register in 1983.
Is this behind the
It's in there.
cemetery, Oakland Cemetery?
Yes.
Yes, it was. Right.
Yeah, we took a tour of all that 2 years ago.
Not 2 years, it's
No.
way longer than that.
Many years ago.
So these are the ones that, like I say, there were 6 of them. And one by one, taken down until it was just that one left.
My understanding was if something's on the National Register, it can't be torn down, can it?
I can speak to that with a great deal of authority since I ran the National Register program in Mississippi for many years. The National Register recognizes historically significant properties and protects them in relation to any federal undertakings, but privately owned properties are not protected from private actions under listing of the National Register. It only relates to actions taken by the federal government.
Like I just found this today, it was included in 1983, when they put it on the National Register, they had all of them there, and anyway, they're all gone now. The last thing I want to mention is Rosenwald schools. All the Rosenwald schools that were done by Julius Rosenwald, they were built between 1912 and 1932, mainly in the South and the rural areas. You can see 167 of them just in northwest Louisiana. They got the materials usually from Sears, and Julius Rosenwald, he contributed 1/3 of the cost. And so out of these 37 schools, I have a list of the ones that were built in Caddo Parish. And it says 0 are left standing. Well, I'm not so sure about that. We have a patron who is an expert on Rosenwald schools, and I'm going to have to talk to her because I think there's, yes.
So actually, looking at Natchez, we have the National Center for Preservation Training and Technology, Jason Church there. They're currently doing a project in Rosenwald schools where they're photographing and imaging them. If I can get you two together, you might be able to give you a little more information on how many are standing, where they are, and pictures of whatnot.
Yeah. 'Cause I think this patron, she's told me she's found some in Caddo, so if so, I'll have to,
We had the speech here in February.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the same one, Shonda.
and she showed us pictures of one of them, storing hay right now out in the field.
Yeah, nothing else Jason would like to know if there are any left.
Yeah. This one is, this is one, this is from, I think, from the state archives or, that photo there. But they looked similar, they were, and there were, I don't know how many across the country, but, like I say, I'm not sure about if there's none left in,
Well, they were built on similar floor plans.
yeah.
Deliberately, they were,
What did they have?
duplicated like that purposely.
Did they, I'm not sure, did they have two separate rooms?
Well, there were different floor plans, but, it was like that, very simple. And I think some of them were like L-shaped and different shapes, but they were modular is what I was trying to say. And, they were, on a pattern that they duplicated time and time again.
And this was first grade to high school?
There was one of those schools right by our house. I lived out on Elby Plantation. When you walk right through the door, well, there's a porch on the front. When you walk right in the door, there's a hall. The hall going to the right went to a room, hall going to the left went to a room, and if you walk straight on through, you'd walk into the kitchen. And that's where they did the cooking and things like that, but they would teach first, second, and third, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade.
Boys and girls? Boys and girls?
Yeah,
Yes.
They were all public schools.
Yeah, there was teachers that would come down, that was a black school. And there was teachers that would come down out of town. This Cato and, I just remember when
You went there?
no, I don't know, it was right next to the house, Kathleen.
So that's all of the 23 on the list. I do have, if anybody's interested, they're taking nominations for 2024 for ones to put on the endangered places list. I have the application for that it tells, the requirements and has so if anybody's interested, you have to get it in by March of next year to be put on the 2024 endangered places list. And so they add some every year. Those first two that I talked about, Woolworth and the Friendship House, were the two they added for this area. But anyway, I have several of these, if anybody's interested, on nomination form to put something on most endangered places. So it mentions the criteria necessary.
So if I could ask a question. So I missed the Jordan Street, the 690 Jordan, but of the 23 that is on this list, I didn't count, but I guess there's 23.
Yes.
7 of them are endangered. The rest of them, 3 are lost. 4 are lost. 7 are endangered. So the rest of them are in pretty good shape, right? I mean, since they're,
I wouldn't go so far as to say pretty good shape.
well, if they're in progress,
They
they're
have
safe,
plans
right?
for them.
Let's see.
But like I said, I missed the designation on the Jordans, the third one down.
I've got 9 that are endangered. The 2 from this year, let's see, the Jordan one, the one on Jordan is endangered. The Antioch Baptist Church is,
Artist Johnson.
Artist Johnson,
Bridges McKellar,
yeah, Bridges McKellar,
Mutual Building.
the Mutual, let's see. Well, yeah, the Ogilvy Grocery, that's lost.
I got lost on that.
Yeah, that's lost.
Okay.
And then the Sanger one is endangered.
No, and I understand, I'm not saying they don't need to be still on this list, just because they're in progress, but, that's not a bad track record for so many of them being worked on.
What are the plans for the Rubenstein building?
Well,
Did you say, I think that was in progress, isn't it?
yeah, that one is, it's in progress. I don't know if they're thinking about doing, apartments or not.
Do you know anything about the Goldring building that's on the same street?
No, I'm not sure about that.
It's, if you go on, it's one way, in the next block from Rubenstein's to the left, it has glass doors. It was a very fine department store. I worked there when I was in Homestead, with rings about this big. If you never stop to look at it, stop and look at it. It was a specialty store for women, and it was owned by the May Company. And on the wall, it was a mezzanine that you went up, and they had furs and millinery. People were still wearing hats in the 1960s, I guess. But on the wall there, it's still there, or at least it was the last time, there's a sculpture of the high fashion cities, Milan, New York, Paris, and it's a huge sculpture there on that really should be saved. The building was an office supply place. When I first moved here in 2015, I don't know what happened to it after that, but I worked down there in 1960. 1966 to 1968 often. I'd come back and work summers when I was in college. And it was, the streets were packed with people. There were people just walking up and down the street, window shopping. There was a nice theater across the street. Next to that was a popular Chinese restaurant. But people would go, and there was another one called the Fair that was on that cross street. And that was another high I'm saying high fashion, better than Dillard's. More like I don't know, but anyway, it was a little bit nicer than that.
Spring Street, that's right.
And, Reuben's Streets, I would go just back and forth and shop, It was really something, because there's nothing going on down there now. That was when the oil money was here, the replied money.
Yeah, I know, the Slattery building, which is 17 floors, the same person who owns that now, we sold it 20 years ago or more. He also owns the Artist Johnson building. And I don't know what plans are for those two. There's quite a number of them that are empty down there.
The Selber's building was another real popular department store. They're on the corner, so it was Rubenstein, Selber's, and Gold Rings. Those were the three big ones.
Palais was across the street from Selber's.
It's been saved. It's a the last I knew about it just a couple of years ago, it was a government level computer storage facility. Very high tech, very private. They had some things on the outside that make it look like a department store, to try to keep the history of it. I don't know, I haven't been down there in a long time. But I went into it when they were working on it. I was doing a story for them. And it had just beautiful details in there that I didn't really remember as a teenage girl, brass elevators and just gorgeous stuff. And they saved as much of it as they could. It was turning out really, really nice. You can't get in there anymore.
Are there any questions? Well, thank y'all for coming.
Thank you.